Big up yourself, kings and queens, all you original kings and queens. Big up yourself. Welcome back to another episode of the Big Up Yourself Show. And look, it is the 15th episode of the Big Up Yourself Show. Oh my God. And don't mind if I take a moment and just do some celebrating because look, look at that. We are sipping our favorite drink of the Pick Up Yourself Show, some champagne. Yeah, because it is the 15th episode, and this might be a long one, you guys. It might even be two episodes because it is loaded, jam-packed with life and insight. And I'm celebrating too because I'm coming a far way. I'm coming from feeling like I couldn't get on camera to be hosting a whole show. I big up myself with my special voice and everything. I stepped out of my comfort zone and now I hold space for everyday people to share our stories and to continue our healing process and inspire others. This show features captivating conversations that are about helping you to recognize and walk in your power after surviving trauma. It's about encouraging you to develop the habit of giving yourself credit where you deserve credit. It's about empowering you to speak up for yourselves. It's about healthy self-esteem and showing up as you were originally created to. That original you before abuse and trauma took you off track. We big up ourselves for surviving difficulties and going on to do great things. That's why it's called Big Up Yourself, celebrating the original you. That's why I greet you as originals, original kings and queens. And my guest today is a very special and truly original person, and I'm about to introduce him. But just before that, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Take 5 seconds and do that right now. I'm going to do the countdown for you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for subscribing and welcome, and give us a thumbs up to support the work. And please drop a juicy supportive comment. Your likes and comments, they do matter. They make a big difference and they really help us out. And I'm going to challenge you to watch this episode to the end. And if you think of a comment, just comment. And if you can't think of something, just comment wow. YouTube doesn't care what your comment is. It just cares that you make a comment. I do care what your comment is. So I'm asking you to leave a juicy, supportive comment, but YouTube doesn't care. So if you just comment wow, that's fine. So I'm very honored to have today's guest. Yay! He is the first. Oh my goodness, that applause. He is the first male to grace the Big Up Yourself Show stage. And I am so pleased you agreed to come.
I would not have missed it.
Oh, I'm so happy because I'm glad because you are not intimidated by the potential audience. And you're not bothered that we are a brand new show just getting off the road, just getting off the ground. And you've been on big stages and in big rooms, and you're with us today. And I am truly honored.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm honored as well, believe me. So, and we'll talk about that.
Yes, we'll talk about that. Now, Rhett and I have something in common, you guys. We are both survivors of childhood sexual trauma, and you'll get to know how we became acquainted in a minute, right? The amazing Mr. Rhett Hackett, we welcome you to the show. I am beyond thrilled to have you today. And I know you're very busy, so I do humbly appreciate your time. Now, Rhett, we go way back.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And before I read your amazing bio, and get into today's conversation. Um, well, let me just say it's going to be a very revealing and in depth conversation, right? And so I want to warn you guys to hold on to your seats and be prepared, as it's going to get real deep and you might get triggered. By the way, nothing we say here is meant to diagnose or treat anything and does not take the place of professional counselors. We're just sharing our experiences and our thoughts and opinions. So please proceed at your own risk. And now I'm going to read Mr. Rhett Hackett's bio. Rhett Hackett is the president and co-founder of the Humanity Preservation Foundation. He's the host of Hands Off, RVN TV, and I want to hear some more about that later. It's a weekly television show on RVN TV network, and he's an award-winning speaker. Oh my God, I'm so honored to have you, Red. Red is a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. He appeared and went public on the Oprah Show in 2010 and has been speaking and advocating for survivors ever since on radio, television, newspapers, and as a presenter on the topic of interpersonal violence. I'd never heard that term before. Now, he works with law enforcement and legislators. Together with his team at Humanity Preservation Foundation, he has launched an outreach aimed at the connection of childhood trauma with addiction and launched a recovery platform called Recovery Your Way. I'm curious about that too. And that's as an extension to his services at the Humanity Preservation Foundation. Welcome. And so,
thank you so much.
If you've watched any of my episodes of my show, you know my warm-up question has to do with my guest names, right? And every time I hear your name, I think of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind talking about Red.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, is that where your name came from?
It is. So my mom read the book, saw the movie, was a huge Clark Gable fan. And my brother was already born. He's 3 years older than me. He took on my dad's name as Junior. And so when I was born and it was a boy, she said, this is what I want to name him. I want to name him.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
And life has a way of setting you up, and sometimes it's not within your time frame that you're looking for. But because I hated my name when I was in school, people didn't even know what, I mean, you didn't really hear it then, so everybody screwed it up. They called it Brett or Red or whatever. They'd be like, what is it? So I used to hate introducing myself because I knew what I was going to go through. And then now, fast forward and doing the work that I do, guess what name they remember? You only have to remember the first name. Like I'm in that category of Elvis, Madonna, whatever. And believe me, I'm not saying I'm at that level for them, but my point is that it's a lot easier for them to remember just Brett.
Right. So you feel better about it now.
100%.
Yes. That's such a familiar story here on the Big Up Yuself Show.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Now, my memory is a little spotty, right? Mm-hmm. And I cannot quite remember how we became acquainted. Do you remember?
Oh, I totally remember. So I and here's the thing. I literally, my wife and I were eating dinner before this came up, and I told her the story of how I know where I was when we connected. So it was after doing the Oprah Show in 2010, which it aired, it was November of 2010, but then of course we move into 2011. And you had connected also with Howard Fradkin,
Second, yeah,
who is the author. He was
yes,
also on the show. He was one of the primary individuals on that.
yes,
And you were, yes. So I'm in that book.
yes.
And you were doing the
The
Outspoken
outspoken
magazine,
magazine, yeah.
and I was in the movie theater, and I got a message from you that said, who you were, what you were doing, that you were going to be interviewing Howard Fradkin, and that you would like me to be also featured in the magazine. And the movie was over, and we came outside, and I responded, and I was like, absolutely, I would totally do it. So then I
Yes,
did that article, and he's on the cover of that.
yes,
And
yes. Yes,
then
here.
I did another article. Yep, that's the one. So I'm in there. I think I'm right in the center. Um, and then I did another article after that where we were on the cover, and there were multiple survivors of trauma on it. And
Yeah, yeah,
the subject was like about moving forward and something like
yes.
that. And yeah. So we were connected ever
Can't
since.
believe how well. Oh my God, my memory is shot. Oh my God, I can't believe how well you remember all that. Oh
Oh, my wife could tell you all kinds of things. I remember. I have a very good memory.
yeah, so I did work with Dr. Howard Fradkin. Yeah,
Yes.
I did a lot of work with him. And oh my God, I read this book through, and I have so many notes in this book. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was cool. And so we come to the Oprah Show. How did you come to be a guest on the Oprah Show?
So I love how we're doing this. So here's how it played out. There was never a time that I didn't realize that I was a survivor of child sex abuse. We often always think that we are the only one, of course. And it wasn't until 2005 that I made the decision to address it professionally and walk into a psychologist's office. And so after about 3.5 years, let's just say by 2009, I mean, I thought I was doing great. 2006, 7, 8, like, this was great. And
Ah,
I loved the process. And then 2009, I kind of had finished writing it all down, and there was just something about it showing back up at you in black and white that kind of like knocked me out a little bit backwards, or so I thought.
yes.
And so I had to do something. And I'm sorry, let me just back up real quick. When I started therapy, I made it very clear that I had no interest in doing anything that was group therapy, none of that. But lo and behold, in 2009, when I hit this point, now we come into 2010, and I find male survivor. And I went on a retreat in the mountains of Georgia for a weekend.
Was that with
Um,
Fradkin?
that was with Howard. So that's how I met Howard. Oh, I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I mean to knock out of the camera there. Um,
Wow.
and it was the first time that I had heard what had been swirling in my head for 20 years coming out of the mouths of other men.
Other
and
man. Yeah.
and I became a different person by the end of that weekend. It was May of 2010. So I walked away from that angry, but in a good way. In a good way, knowing that there were so many people out there that were suffering from this, knowing that there were some of the guys that were there that probably were still going to struggle.
Yes.
And it was heartbreaking. And I was like, I want to speak. Like I
Wow.
want to speak. I want to speak out. I because what ended up happening in that weekend was that I really 100%, although for years in therapy I was saying, I know it wasn't my fault. I know it wasn't my fault. I know it wasn't my fault. But I, I'm it's more so in my head and not in my heart, because you're
Yes.
just trying to convince yourself.
Yeah.
I walked away from that weekend realizing exactly where the shame and the blame and everything landed, and there was no question. So lo and behold, I had gone on like another, like some of the guys from that weekend of that retreat had kind of like done some little like sub weekend things, and that's what I had done. And it was in that weekend that I had heard that somebody had picked up on the fact that the Oprah Winfrey Show wanted to do a special on men who had been
Mhm.
sexually abused, and
Mhm.
you would go on her website and submit your name, and I did that.
Oh.
And then by September, I was in the driveway of my house doing my phone interview for them to, decide whether you're going to move on to the next step.
Yeah.
And then the end of September, right into the beginning of October, I received the email saying, "Okay, you're in." And I was I was grateful. Believe me, I was grateful. But I was determined to, like, I didn't want to just be on the show. Like, I wanted to be on the show.
Yeah.
And I was at my daughter's back to school night, and my phone rang and it said Oprah producer. And I answered it, and that's when they told me that I'd be one of the 6 men that would be profiled for all
Sure.
Oprah
Yeah.
footage.
Yeah.
And so they ended up changing my flight and all that. I came out actually a day early, which is when we filmed all that. And so what I want to tell you all is that, and I do this whenever I'm speaking, is I so that weekend in the mountains, they really, for no, like, I mean, I don't want to say for no reason, certainly not for the reason of where it took me, but they walk you through the process of how to tell your story. That's really
Wow.
one of the things, because we know that when you speak the words is when you shatter the shame, the healing
Yeah.
really begins. That's really how it begins. So um and so now, the first time that I'm publicly, like, telling details of what happened to me it's going to be on the Oprah Show. And it's being filmed, like, there's like a giant light here, and there's like the makeup powder person here, and there's the
Yeah.
producer in front of you, and there's a camera crew, and I remember sitting there, not scared, just wanting to do it correctly,
Yeah.
but confident in what I was about to do. I knew was going to not just change my life, but I knew it was going to change others. And
My goodness.
I was ready.
My goodness. That's amazing. Um, And yes, this is getting ready to be a long conversation because I do have a lot of questions, and I want to put the audience inside of your story. And I want people to understand the magnitude of the damage child sexual abuse does in a person's life, and that it doesn't end in childhood, it carries on through adulthood. And I want us to help someone else tell their story, because telling the story, we know, is a vital way to relieve some of the shame and guilt that comes with this type of abuse. And if it is possible for a survivor to receive some sort of justice by them speaking up after hearing us share, then I know we're doing our work. And we're in 2023, but this is still a taboo topic, right? There is
Which
still
is
so much stigma and shame attached to this type of conversation.
all right.
It's tough, but somebody has to do it. And we as humanitarians have been chosen, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
now that was the first time you were going public with your story, right? Had you told anybody else before that?
Yes, I had told my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time,
Yeah.
back before we were married. She was the first person I had ever told.
Wow.
And then um a week after I started therapy, I told my best friend, Mike. And that conversation, I think it probably took about 90 minutes for me to say 3 words because I just couldn't get it out. And
Oh my goodness.
I was just so scared. And, but I learned. And but that's what I mean by saying like the world is like the universe is setting you up in
Yeah.
these processes. And so um everything, every person, every situation played a role in
And
that
getting you ready
development
to
of it.
do that.
Yeah. So
Old were you? How old were you when you appeared on the Oprah Show?
let's see. I was well, I would have been 48. No, no, no. Oh my God, 38. Let me think. So 2010, and what is this? 20. So it's been 13 years.
13 years. Okay.
13 years.
Okay.
So and I'm going to be, so I'm 53. So I was 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I hear you say that you were somewhat prepared and you were kind of ready, but it
Mhm.
must have taken tremendous courage for you to break your silence and speak up like that. What is it that really made you decide to speak up at that time? Like, what made you say, I'm going to come forward on the Oprah Show?
Well, I think that I believe that there's an internal component in some people that are there to do that. I Back in the day, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted special education. I wanted to work with children that struggled. So I used to do volunteerism for adult literacy. So there is something in there in terms of just kind of like that natural advocate within me. But I really do believe that it was understanding the horror, and understanding the just the struggle that was within for so long. And I say this lightly, I got off easy in terms of the coping mechanisms. And
Mm.
what I mean by
Yes,
that,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
what I mean by that is that my coping mechanism from the point in which that abuse was taking place while I was in high school, middle school, and then into my adulthood was to be the best. Because my fear was that if I failed at something, you would be able to connect the dots of what the secret was that I was hiding. So when I was in school, I mean, I worked for every grade I had. I was student council. I was, you name it. And then as I progressed into adulthood, it was now I'm going to be the best college student. Now I'm going to be the best employee. Then, and
So
even as
perfectionism.
once I was married,
Mhm.
I like now I'm going to be the best husband and the best dad,
Yeah.
and 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 so that was my coping, that was my defense mechanism. And what ends up happening is, although it's not the same as like drug and alcohol abuse because that is so toxic,
Right, right.
but you end up with,
Perfectionism was your thing.
yeah,
Yes,
so you
yes,
end up with hypertension, anxiety. I mean,
yes.
that's how you end up with high blood pressure and everything that goes along with it. And really, you run out of gas. And that's what happened in 2005 is I started to run out of gas because
Got
now
it.
I'm like juggling all these balls in the air. And 30 is a magic number. I tell people this all the time whenever I'm working with people, because in your 20s, you have your strongest defense mechanisms. And then when you're hitting like around 30, you're starting to, life is getting a little bit more complicated. You're probably in your career, maybe your mortgage, maybe you're married, maybe you have your first kid. And while you had all of this to defend what was boiling inside of you, now the balls start to get a little heavier. There's a little bit more of them. And that's when things start to really kind of break down. And usually what I've seen is it starts somewhere within the lack of sleep category, whether it's night terrors and trauma that repeats itself, and then you just become a weaker version of what was a stronger person. And so anyway, that is really how that all developed. And so
do you think that if you had not gone to the retreat in the mountains, you probably wouldn't have wouldn't have had the courage to do the show? Or
I don't know. I'd like to say that maybe eventually.
yeah,
I don't know. I know that it certainly was a major contributor to doing that. And I honestly, like just walking through that process, learning how to tell your story, it worked, and it lined itself up in a way that
right.
then, and I guess there was a part of me that was like, how could you not speak out? I am that person. Like that's just who I am in a way. Like, I mean, I'd advocate for anybody.
Yeah,
So on a topic that wasn't even the same.
yeah,
So I just felt like I had to do it. And,
yeah.
you answer a calling, and that's really what
Right,
it is. And we're
right,
all called. We're
right,
all called.
right.
Could be daily, weekly, whatever. But certainly that was it for that time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I will tell you, because you said like just like the not fear, but so when you do that show, you have to sign a waiver, and you sign off on a press release saying that, A, you're not going to say it. They give you a date of when you can start speaking about it. And so I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. So it was a major metro newspaper. I
Yes.
knew that press release that I authorized them to do was going to end up at the newspaper that I worked at, and nobody knew. So on top of that, so now I come back, and of course I tell somebody, and they ask, do you want to do a story? And I was like, absolutely. So it was going in the Inquirer, and it was also going to go in the Daily News, our sister paper. So and then I knew the date that the show was going to air, and they gave you the date when you could start talking about it. So it was kind of like 2 weeks before. So, my biggest fear was somebody hearing it, that they hear it on TV, not
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that would have been heartbreaking to me. So my wife asked me, she said, well, what do you want to do? And we do a big Christmas party every year. We've done, I don't know, theme parties. So I was like, well, I really want to have a party. And we called it the I have something to tell you party. And so we invited as many people as we could, and food, a little bit of Miller Lite, whatever. And
Wow.
sat everybody down, and there were some people in the room that had already known what was coming, but most people really just didn't know.
We're
And
just shocked.
so
Wow.
yeah, and I think what I try to tell people is that, like, my vision of my thought process of like how I always thought it would play out when I would tell people, there wasn't one time that it ever came true,
I
because
know.
I thought I thought the walls would fall down. I thought,
I
and it
know
was
what
the
you
complete
mean.
opposite.
Exactly. I know what you mean. You guys leave a comment of support for Red and myself. Leave a comment, right? For all the survivors of childhood sexual assault. Leave a
Yeah,
comment for us, right?
for
Because this
sure.
is tough stuff. Now,
Um,
I was going to ask you, what was your support system like during at that time? But I see
well, it was
right.
crazy. It was crazy good. I also like um I before the show had aired, I went public on Facebook, and put it out there. And it was unbelievable. And then that article in the Inquirer, appeared before the show aired, before the airing of the show. And I remember driving across the Walt Whitman Bridge and getting an email from somebody. And then there was I got into work and I came in, and there was the security guard at the front desk just looked at me and he was like, "Well done." That's all he said to me, "Well done." And then I went outside, and this a guy that he was a contractor for our direct mail, sent me the most unbelievable message of just, you know, way to go, buddy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just, he was like, "I already had respect for you, but wow." And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, man, oh man, you like lived in
Yeah.
fear of
Yeah.
telling the story that it was going to
Yes.
ruin your life. And really, the reality is that, first of all, if there was anybody that really had a problem with that story, I really don't think I'm going to be connected with you. So that's number
Right.
one.
Right.
But the
Right.
second thing was just that, like, who's sitting out there afraid to tell their story because of the same reasons?
That
And
was my thing too, Rhett. When I first decided to come forward, I was scared to death that people were going to shun me and call me dirty and nasty.
yeah,
And I found the complete opposite, just like you. I found the complete opposite, that people were supportive. And what it did was it allowed a lot of people to come forward with their own stories. And that
well, that's what I was going to say is, so now the show has aired, both episodes, 2 articles, and I like jumped right into advocacy and speaking. I was immediately on the radio. I was asked to do that show. I was asked to speak at a legislative breakfast, and all these things are happening. Every time I'm done speaking, I have somebody in front of me telling me what's happening, that it happened to them, it happened to their dad, it
yes,
happened to,
yes,
and then I was walking down Broad Street, and this woman came up to me, and she just stopped me and she said, "You're that guy. You're that guy that I saw in the paper, and you went on Oprah." And she starts crying and she hugs me and she just lightly says in my ear, "Thank you for telling our story."
story.
And I was blown away. And this just
Mhm.
continued. And that was when I knew I had to create something that was going to, I don't
Yeah,
know, educate,
yeah,
to prevent.
yes,
Um,
yes,
but I also, I ran into so many people. This was the part that bothered me the most. And I know from my own struggle is they just didn't know what to do. Like they
yes.
just had no clue. And some people didn't even, I didn't even know at the time, but like they didn't know that there were books written on this. They didn't
Yeah.
know that there was, and believe me, there was not a lot of material out back then, especially
True,
for men.
true.
But it was hell navigating myself through the process of just finding a doctor and
I
finding a psychologist,
know.
and
Finding
like,
support. Yes.
right. And here's the thing I say all the time is that, like, this country, we don't ask for help, and we don't, we wait until we're like at the 11th hour struggling the most before we would, if we do ask for help, that's when it happens.
Mhm,
And then we take the first thing that we can get. And
mhm.
that's why you end up with bad therapists and all kinds of things. But
Right.
um, the the process is, so now here I am. Remember, I told you that that time period came where I thought I was going backwards and I was having like a really rough time. Here I am. I'm making these phone calls trying to find, like, whatever. And even just through any of the time period where, like, I thought the balls were all dropping, like every time I'm on the phone, because you don't just call and talk to the doctor and like, "Oh, okay, come in." It's I'm repeating the story of,
Yes, I
"My
know.
name is so and so, and here's what's happening to me, and I need to see somebody," and blah blah blah. Like, I am re-traumatizing myself
Yes,
every
yes,
time I'm repeating this.
yes.
So I knew that that was going on, and I thought, well, maybe we could do something where a part of this is where like we kind of do like the legwork for somebody, and also like, okay, so here, this is who I used, and this is who you used, and this one, almost like the Angie's list of people who
Yes,
are
yes, yes,
abused.
yes.
And that was the genesis behind coming up with the Humanity Preservation Foundation, along with educating to prevent it from happening. Because if you want to preserve humanity, it starts with preserving the innocence of children, because
And we're
that's
gonna
how.
get to that. We're gonna get to that, right? But I so up to now we haven't quite talked about what happened to you.
Yes,
So
great.
what happened? What happened to
Yeah.
you?
So I, I was born in 1969, so I was raised in the 70s. And it was certainly, I grew up in a very small town, down at the shore, in Lacey Township, Forked River, and
Small
very
town
small.
where? Where
What's
is
that?
this? Where? Small
Oh,
town.
near like Long Beach Island and Seaside Heights, where most people know Seaside Heights from the
What state is that? I don't
oh,
know.
New Jersey, the Jersey Shore.
Oh, New Jersey.
So most
Okay.
people know Seaside because of Snooki and that whole thing. So,
Okay.
um, but yeah. So I mean, I grew up at the time period, number one, where like people didn't lock doors, and the conversation at that time for kids was stranger danger, and that was the narrative and what to do, if a stranger comes and gets you. Um, but
Uh-huh.
what nobody really was talking about was,
Uh-huh.
what do you do when it's somebody that you know?
Yes, yes,
What do you do when it's somebody that is a trusted adult?
yes.
Um, because that education didn't exist.
Mhm.
So there was a gentleman in our neighborhood. He was much older. He was 60 at the time, and you know, he had a boat. He had a bunch of junk that, like, he used to sell at a yard sale, and he would take us kids like to Atlantic City. While he and his girlfriend went into the casino, we would go on the rides or whatever. And so it was a oh, and so I'll really kind of like cut to the chase that there was the grooming process. So that's what that is right there. And then um, I became the chosen individual where he shared with me his collection of pornographic magazines. So you're a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy who's not going to look at that, like,
Right.
So one evening, in May, he that was the first time that he made his very first physical move. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because um, there are 6 stages that a predator goes through in terms of getting to a victim, and the 1 through 4 and number 6 really could probably just apply to anything,
Yes.
anyone. But number 5 is the one that I tell parents and students and children, if you focus on this, you could save your child's life. And that is the moment that they sexualize the relationship. And what I mean by that is, for me, he used to ask me if I was still a virgin. Did I sleep with this girl yet in the neighborhood? Did I sleep with that one? So this is a conversation that an adult outside of your parents or whoever else is not supposed to be having with a child. And
No, at
so
12
as
years old.
exactly. So if we educate kids to recognize that, then there's something in there. So
Yeah.
anyway, um, and so then he put his hand in my crotch, and
Where
I
was
didn't know
this
what to
happening? At,
say or to do, or I just
was
didn't even
this
know.
was this at his house?
It was at his house. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So from there, it just progressed each time just a little bit more, to the point where now there is no stone being unturned in any
Wow.
sexual way, shape, or form. So
Wow.
whether it was um, oral sex on him, oral sex on me, um, whether it was sodomizing me as a kid, And this is all going on, and he's telling me that this is perfectly normal. This is what guys and boys do.
So
And
can
that
I ask
it's going to
you?
be kind of like our secret. What's that?
Please forgive me for interrupting you, but
Yeah.
while this was happening to you, did you feel like something was wrong, or did you just think it was normal because he probably told you it was normal?
What was the first part of the question?
Did you feel like while it was happening, while all the stuff he was doing to you and making you do to him, did you feel like something was wrong? Did you feel like it was
So,
wrong?
here's what I tell people all the time: is it never felt right.
Yeah.
It's not that it felt
Yeah.
wrong. It just
Yeah.
never felt right. Now,
Like,
part of that piece to saying that it never felt wrong is because as a child, your internal component as a defense mechanism is to try and check you out of that trauma while it's actually happening. Of course, you don't understand that as you're 12 and 13 years old. So, and I try to explain, of course, I'm giving the very paraphrased version of this, but it doesn't start off in a painful way in any way, because if it
right.
did, that's
Right.
when children tell, and so but it really got weird and crazy as things developed. And I now looking back, I know that it was becoming aggressive, and it was more aggressive whenever he was drinking, but I didn't really piece that together.
Yeah.
And so there was an incident in which he had me in his bedroom. His girlfriend was in the shower in the bathroom, and he started, and he was so aggressive that day, and I was 16 at the time. I was
My
16.
goodness, 12
And
to 16.
what's that?
From 12 to 16.
Yeah. So the good part, if there is one, he was a a dual home resident. So he lived in central New Jersey, and he had a shore house. So he wasn't there all the time. So thank goodness.
Okay.
But in the middle of this, his girlfriend walks in, and he had always had me convinced that if anybody ever found out, that we would both get in trouble. And I thought, this is the end. So I jumped up and pulled my pants up and ran out the door and ran home. And then I waited for the repercussions of what was to come. And day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Now it's a week. Nothing. So she did nothing. But I'm almost thankful that she didn't. I don't know. It was in that moment that I started to put 2 and 2 together and started asking myself some questions. And the question that I asked was, if this is perfectly normal and this is what guys and boys do, why would we get in trouble?
Right.
And that's when I knew that something wasn't right.
Wow.
And that's when I started to slip from the grip. And by this time I was 17, I got my driver's license, and he wanted me to give him a ride in my car. And I did. And we went down to this cul-de-sac where they were building homes. And his first move always was the same, almost every single time. And it was his left hand on the inside of my right thigh. And that's what he did, sitting in the passenger seat. I'm in the driver's seat. And with that, I put my hand on top of his, and I said, you know what? I can't do that anymore. And he was like, okay. And I went back, I dropped him off, and I was in a state of just shock that could it have been that easy? At the times when I wanted it to stop, when it did become so painful and so almost torturous. I mean, he did a lot of things. Urinated on me in my mouth, and things that just you shouldn't have done as a kid. And
Oh my
but
goodness.
I had that survival component in me to say, all right, well, now I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna be a teacher. I'm never gonna tell anybody any of this.
So
And that was it.
why, okay, while it was happening and it felt kind of weird, um, why did you not tell anybody?
I love people that ask that
Same
question.
thing happened to me, by the way. So I know.
No. I know that you're not asking it in the
Yeah,
way of like,
right.
so here's why. And I talk about this whenever I'm speaking, is that that is a part of the grooming process. And I'm going to elaborate on that. And that there's this, I call it the complexity, because you are sold under the belief that you are an active participant. So let me trace this. I'll start from the beginning. So now here's this process. Okay, yeah, here's this. Oh yeah, you kids can smoke in my house, no big deal. And you guys want a beer? Here, have a beer. Okay. And then for me, here, oh well, hey, listen, here's my magazines. Like, you can go in there anytime. It's just you and I here at the house. Okay. Now this happens. Well, I didn't say no on being able to smoke in his house, and I didn't tell my mom and dad, and I didn't say no on the times that he gave me the beer. And these two things, smoking and drinking, are adult activities.
Got
I
it.
didn't say no or tell my mom and dad, hey, I'm looking at porn magazines.
Right.
So therefore, now you've got me in this cycle of a trap.
Right.
And guess what? Now he says
Right.
to me, don't say anything. It's our
Yes.
secret,
Got it.
because everything else is a secret too
Got it.
behind it. And the reason why I didn't tell, and I tell this to people all the time, is because I was a kid and he was an adult, and he
Yeah.
told me not to
Not to
tell.
tell. Yes.
And then I'll also add to that too. People say to me, why'd you go back? And I went back because he was an adult and I was a kid, and he told me, you have to make sure you come back. Otherwise, people are going to ask questions. Okay. All right. Great. Whatever you, I mean, I don't want to be found out about this or anything else that I've been doing here
Right.
that I
Right.
knew I probably shouldn't have been doing, but
Right.
it's done. So now here you are, and it's literally like falling into a spider web.
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons it's so important that we open up about our traumatic experiences is so that these experiences have no more control over us, right? And people don't realize that we're survivors of a crime. Most people wouldn't downplay the trauma of someone being held up at gunpoint, but they'll be dismissive of a trauma of a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. In most instances, things were done to us against our will, or we are coerced and
Mm-hmm.
manipulated into thinking what's happening is okay.
Sure.
So I've been challenged that I share too much. But for me, I have to share because it's almost like needing to vomit, right? I have to get it out. It's like pent up gas, right? And speaking out releases some of the pressure. And um, abuse like that can render you powerless. And speaking out helps me to take my power back, but it's still not easy to do. So I know that while you're talking, it's still not easy to talk about it, but keeping it inside, for me, um, it hurts me more to keep it inside than to not talk. And Maya Angelou has a quote that goes, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside. And I feel like if I didn't talk, I'd probably be an addict of some sort, of drugs or alcohol or whatever, or I'd be completely out of my mind, right?
Mhm.
So they'll say that we should move on. It's in the past, and um, we should just move on. But how do you move on from an adult urinating on you? How do you have a healthy sex life after that?
Sure.
How do you develop healthy self-esteem after that?
Yeah.
What do you say to people who think that you might be too explicit when you share?
Well, there's a couple things. Here's the thing. I truly believe that you always own your story. That
Yeah,
this is the part, if life is a movie, this is the part of the movie where you become not just the director and the producer, but you're the star of the show.
you're the
And
star. Mhm.
you get to decide how much you're going to tell and how much you are not going to tell.
Mhm.
And that is your right to do that. Now, with caution, obviously, I always try to know my audience and to
Yeah,
who I'm
yeah,
speaking to.
yeah,
And I also really don't, for the most part, I will tell you, even when I'm working with a group of people, that I don't really promote individuals to tell the details of their story unless they really feel the need to do it. Um,
yes,
but there's a couple reasons why. Number one, you don't have to tell me the details for me to believe you. All you have to
yeah,
do is just tell me that it happened.
yeah,
The second thing is that when we start to compare, we get silent. So somebody sitting in the back of the room that hears that this person was raped 50 times and it only happened one time to them thinks that their story means nothing. And
mhm,
the truth of the matter is, whether it's 150 or 100, it has the exact same impact.
yeah, yeah,
But to your point, I'm very honest with people and I say, if you're coming to me for me to work with you because you just want to be done with this and move on, then I'm not your person,
yeah,
because the truth of the matter is it doesn't work that way. The
right,
truth is that it will be with you forever, and that
right,
you will need to learn how to manage what takes place for the rest of your life.
mhm,
But there's a difference between living in your story
yes,
as the victim
yes,
versus living as an individual that is worthy of a good life. And
yes,
that is just a story within your life.
within
And
you,
the truth of the matter is, whether you address it and angle it in that way, or you don't do anything with it and it still got you, it's still
yeah,
it's still going to be there. So
yeah,
that's why I really want people to understand that this is the way that it works. And I was really truthful when I said that if somebody had a problem, a real problem with the fact of that story, you are not in my lane. And there,
right,
I can't have you in my circle. I don't care who you are. And
yeah,
believe me, I'm not I have done, oh my God, I've worked with thousands at this point. And
yeah,
it is by far the hardest is when it is somebody that's a family member that abused the child. And I,
right,
it's
right,
not easy, and it's very hard because those are often the ones where it's like we don't talk about that. Like, you need to be silent. Like, or
exactly,
why are you ruining our family? Why are you doing this
exactly,
to us?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, but I really try to work with, and there's a wonderful Dr. Sherry Campbell. I don't know if you've ever read any of her stuff, but she is one that she wrote a book that's called um how to rid yourself of your toxic family and love yourself. And
mhm,
and the truth is that sometimes that's what we have to do, and it's
that's true,
unfortunate,
it's
but
true,
title gives you no privilege. I don't
that's
It
true.
doesn't matter who you are, you're not going to treat me less than the great person that I am.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Big up yourself. Big up yourself. Now, let me ask you something. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this, right? There were other kids running around with you guys. Why do you think that you were made? What made you so vulnerable to your abuser? Like, why do you think he chose you?
Well, you know what? I'm asked that a lot. not in the sense of the question for myself, but I've had individuals that I've worked with where they want to know the answer to that for their own selves. And the truth of the matter is, like, it's not like there was a scent to you that drew them, whatever. They saw the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity was there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's all different types of circumstances that puts people inside of somebody's realm of that type of person. I didn't really have that. But it, believe me, a predator is always testing the waters with every child that they come
Yeah.
into contact with.
Yeah. Wow.
And they lay the foundation down to see where the opportunity is going to come up and where the trap is going to be. And,
Mhm.
of course, for me, he saw me as an adolescent boy. Here's the opportunity for you to, hey, look at these magazines. Isn't this cool? Like, it's a natural thing that we do. I mean, I remember when Miss America, all of her pictures went out in Penthouse, and
Yeah.
we all had like, everybody was
Yeah.
dying to look at that magazine. So,
Yeah.
like, there's nothing out of the ordinary in that per se.
Yeah.
It's just that it's being orchestrated by an adult to somebody who's 12, and
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
good. So
Yeah.
I think that's really how it happens, is that opportunity is there.
So you also said on the Oprah Show, right, that predators will groom their victims to the point where it becomes a pleasurable experience. Now, I
Absolutely.
thought that was an incredibly courageous thing for you to say. And it's an important point for us to expand on, because I remember protecting the love I was receiving from my abusers, because I really believed that they loved me. And the truth is, I mean, I'm not so sure I can say that I enjoyed it, the things that they did to me, but at the time, there were some things about it that I liked. On some level, it was pleasurable, right? So, but we were children, and we couldn't make good sense of what was happening to us, since
Sure.
we really didn't know what love was, and we believed that what we were experiencing was some sort of love. We couldn't differentiate between abuse and love, and that's how damaging these experiences are. And then we get to adulthood, and we have to sort through these things, and it can be quite confusing. So how was the experience how was it pleasurable to you?
So, again, I'll go back on what I had said before, that it doesn't start off painful.
Yeah.
Otherwise the recipe doesn't work. So, we are by nature sexual beings. I mean, that's
Right.
just, we're put on this earth. And
Right.
so, um, if you, as an as a male, if somebody, especially as an adolescent male, if anybody is touching your penis, you're going to feel an arousal, and an erection is going to happen.
Right.
um I hear so many times that that is a predator's way of twisting it and having them say, well, look,
You
you
liked
were
it.
excited, you
You
liked
wanted
it.
it. Yeah.
And regardless of what is going on, because it wasn't violent at the time, it was still a sexual experience for me that is registering in a sense of some sort of pleasure. um
Right.
your endorphins are pumping, everything that goes along with it as an adult that
Right.
we know it to be,
A normal way
um,
body functions.
happens.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you know that's part of the problem in terms of the state of fight or flight that then continues as you move forward, and what that does to your developing brain. um, your body is now internally, your mental component is, everything is there trying to protect you from the trauma that is actually happening, because there is a pleasure principle going on, but there's also this painful component in there. So that's why you hear individuals who say they suppressed it, or they would check out while they were being abused.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know I was doing
Yeah.
it. I know
Yeah.
there were times I was doing it. I can tell you what I was looking at the
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
and that's your body's way of getting you through it. So that's the reason why. And I all the time I talk to people that, you know, I can't tell you how many people have an addiction problem because of all of this. And really, I believe what has happened is that at the time, all like your resources to survive as a child, to get you to the next wherever safety adult, has been exhausted. And when this reverberates back into your life again, because it's a wound that has not been
Right.
healed,
Right.
you don't have that same tenacity in the gas tank. And
Mhm.
therefore we look to self-soothe, to
Yeah.
self-medicate, and we look
Yeah.
for things, whether it is to feel good again from
Yes.
another sexual experience. So that's why
Yeah.
we try to sleep it out, we try to drink it, we try to
Yeah.
smoke it.
Right.
And really what ends up happening is it takes you down, and you just become like this angry person that society now looks at you as you have an addiction problem. And
Yeah.
that is even more heartbreaking to me. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether
Yeah.
you were sexually abused, physically abused, neglected, that's abuse. It's all the same type of trauma that,
What was
you know,
it?
children are supposed to be loved and nurtured and taken care of. And when it's a trusted adult that you're looking up to, coaches, teachers, moms, dads, it's traumatizing.
Devastating. Devastating. Now, again, on the Oprah Show, right? The twins. You remember the twins? The
Oh,
ones that
do I
said they
remember
were
the
raped,
twins?
like,
Yeah,
yeah, they were raped like more than 5 times a week and
it's
sometimes
terrible.
twice in a day. And it made me think about sex addicts.
Yes.
And well, you know, there are all types of addicts, but right, but if you're a
Yes.
sex addict,
Yes.
you're a sex addict, and on top of that, you are a deviant. So you don't desire normal sexual encounters, but you're addicted to horrifying antisocial acts. How sick are you? Do you see them as sick, evil, or just bad people?
Wait, I'm sorry, it cut out there for a second. What was the question?
Oh, I was wondering if you see sexual abusers as sick or evil or just bad people.
Um, so I see them as bad people. I do think that there is something wrong with them. Um,
Yes.
but I think it's more so in the sense of somebody who can't stop themselves from doing something wrong, and that just so happens to be the thing. Because you know that we know when we're doing something wrong. We know it.
Okay.
And
Okay. Got you.
um, you know, you have individuals that they steal,
Yes.
and you have individuals that vandalize, and
Yes.
this just so happens to be the thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
I do not believe that it is a sexual identity. And I don't even debate anything on that topic. The bottom line is this, is that you know that person is a child. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
who you are. You
Mm-hmm.
know that person is a child.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment right there is when you know better. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that there's no excuse for it. So
Yes.
I and part of the problem is that society wants to believe that if you were sexually abused, that you are going to become an abuser.
User. Yeah.
And it's not as it's been called, vampire syndrome. It is not vampire syndrome.
Mhm.
And that narrative is what predators want people to think.
To believe. Okay.
Because in that context, what it
It,
does
it
is
does them
it
off the
shuts
hook.
people up. Because if
Uh-huh.
I lived in that fear that this is what people were going to think, I'm going to be silent. And therefore, you're never going to be uncovered that you are a sexual predator.
Yeah.
So the population, really, it's a very small percentage of individuals that were victimized that become abusers, when you factor in all of the people, because most survivors will tell you that they look at child sex abuse as an abhorrent act that
Yeah.
should never happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, some part of me believes that they're sick, and I do believe that they should be removed from society. And I believe if they can't help themselves, they should be castrated. I think that they should be injected with something they call that chemical castration, and they do
Yes.
it in certain countries in the world. And I think that if they can't, if they're unable to control themselves, or I think that they should be castrated. Now, I think we kind of covered this, but I'm not sure. Did you blame yourself,
For
or
years, for
yeah,
years,
yeah,
I it was really the I, I don't know, it was the, I want to say, the cancer cell within me that was killing me, because of just how much I thought I contributed to that happening.
yeah.
But then the light of day came, and that's really what set me free.
Okay. And you already talked about how you came to the realization that it wasn't your fault. Now, do you still have any residue of shame or guilt, and any at all?
No, I
None
do not.
whatsoever. None
With
whatsoever.
I I won't even hesitate in answering that question.
Okay.
There, without a question, no, I do not.
Good for
And
you. Good for you. You're
um,
doing better than me. And I think that's because you continue to do the work with other survivors.
I guess, but I just, here's the thing. It's a really great exercise. Is that there is not a child. If I put a child in an auditorium with adults, there is not every single adult in that room, and that child is holding a piece of candy in their hand. There's an adult in that room. Not one of them could fail at this. They can get that candy from that child because they are a child. They can. There is a way, no matter how strong that is, if you keep at it, somebody is going to be, you're going to be able to get that candy from that child.
Wow.
And that is what innocence is about. That you were an innocent child
Yeah.
and somebody stole something from you pretty damn precious. And if you knew how precious it was, because we don't have that reality as children, you would have never given it away.
Right, right.
And
Yes.
you would have never had somebody steal it from you. They manipulated you to the point where you said, okay, here. And therefore it looks like it's your fault.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not. It's not your fault. You didn't,
Not your
it was
fault,
not
because you
your
were a
fault.
child. You were a child. Now, is it still 1 in 6? Or I've read somewhere that it was 1 in 5. I'm not sure whether it's 5 or 6. It doesn't matter. Someone is a survivor of childhood sexual assault. Please leave a comment if you know someone, or if you are. Maybe you won't say you are, but maybe you know somebody.
Yeah.
Leave a wow if you can't be open. But I
Yeah.
know that every 9 minutes there is a report of child sexual abuse, right? So
Yeah.
it's
And
an epidemic.
I have a really very hard time digesting figures like that.
Yeah.
And in part because, and I've done this, I've been in a room full of men, I've been in a room full of women, and I can go around the room and I can tell you that did you report? Did you report? Did you report? Because I didn't report.
Right.
So the statistic is on reported cases. So I
Reported.
don't think we have our handle around what the number really is. And
Right.
what scares me is I don't want anybody to think, it's gotten better. We don't need to worry about that. That's not a good thing.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because we don't hear it. I'm glad you said that because we don't hear it so much in the headlines anymore, but it is definitely still happening at alarming rates. Oh
Uh,
my God. And
we
that's why it's still important for us to be talking about it.
Oh, it's super important, and I'll tell you one of the number one reason why is, and believe me, and yes, we are starting to see it a little bit, but our worst days are in front of us, and what I mean by that is, um, as we begin to realize the depth of shutdown that took place in 2020 and what
Oh,
it was like for children living in a home with an abusive family member 24/7 with no teachers, home visits, anything to be when they were typically used to getting a break because they'd be at school for 8 hours and now they're trapped in their homes. So we're only let's just say we're almost in 2024. So 4 years, what is that? That's nothing. Like, wait until we have individuals that are 15, 16,
yeah.
20, or when they hit that magic number of 30 and life
Yeah.
gets complicated and they
Yeah. Yeah.
say, guess what happened to me during shutdown?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we're going to see an uptick in mental health issues, drug addiction. It's just, it's not going to be good. So,
Mm.
conversations like this, and I'm going to go down swinging to the end of my life,
Oh,
and
good for
probably for
you.
somebody else,
Good for
because
you.
thank you, and I mean that sincerely, because um we will never, you and I will never know how many people we're actually helping. It's impossible. But
Right.
every night that I go to bed, I know that somewhere out there I've done something, some sort of good, some sort of light on a subject, and the only way that happens is to continue to speak,
Just
because
stop.
my goodness, I can't begin to tell you how many times somebody comes back and says, that happened to me. That happened to
No,
me.
I know.
I didn't even know. I wait, what?
Uh,
Like, I've
uh,
had people, and you kind of alluded to it too, which I thought was interesting. Mostly girls, that they thought they were in a relationship with an adult man.
yes,
Oh my goodness.
that was my story.
And I know of one story where, like, he got her pregnant, took her to New York, had an abortion, like, just, and like, when she finally realized that she was abused, that she was like, oh my God, no wonder I haven't been able to maintain a relationship. And
Right,
she thought
right,
she failed. Like,
right.
it was
Exactly,
unbelievable.
exactly. Yeah. So, and as long as there is sex, right, and sex isn't going anywhere, as long as there's a human desire for sex, unfortunately, there will always be abuse of
Yes,
sex, and children will be victimized and
yes.
become adults who have to grapple with the vestiges of these atrocities against humanity. And we can do our part to prevent their occurrence as much as possible. Um, but the healing is a lifelong journey. Are you ever angry or bitter?
Well, um, I'm angry when I hear of stories that are still going on. Um, I'm angry when I hear stories that, like something probably could have been prevented with some education in school. Um, Bitter, I it's just not within my nature to live. I don't live in a state of bitterness. I don't live in a state of regret. I, uh, are there things that I wish could have been different? Sure. But you know, who wouldn't want that to be different? Who wouldn't? So, but at the same time, I also say that, you know, this is who I am now. And I really like I love who I am. I love what I do and my being and all of that. So I don't know. Like those are the
So,
things. Like, yeah, it would be really nice. Believe me, and I will be so very truthful that, and it's not jealousy, and it's not, but it's just it's a state of wonder. And what I mean by that is, I it would be really nice to have known what it was like as your first sexual experience that wasn't a part of a traumatic event.
yes, yes,
Um, it would
absolutely.
be nice to like I, I wish that it came natural to me in this lifetime, because it does not, and it never will. It will
Yeah.
always become something of what I created to be with my wife, and but it will never be what and I
Was
don't like the phrase
naturally
normal,
supposed
but
to
just
be.
the
Yeah,
when it's a natural progression into that.
yeah,
Um, and I
yeah.
know this. So but I can't be bitter. It's like saying, like, I could never be that way. Because
Yeah,
I am filled with so much gratitude, knowing how dark at one time it was and how
yeah.
bad it could have
Right,
ever really
right,
gotten.
right, right. Now, here's a big one. Have you forgiven him?
So that's a tough one. Because first and foremost, the primary forgiveness was on myself.
Hmm.
Because I I gave myself the freedom to realize that I really didn't do anything wrong. So that was
Yeah.
number one. Number two, my forgiveness was in for him in the sense of for my own personal freedom, not for his, and not saying that what you did was right. The forgiveness comes from, I forgive you for whatever reason you had to become the person that you are that did that to me.
Wow.
um because it's not your not I'm not forgiving you for your behavior, but whatever it was that channeled you to become that, to do that, then I'm going to forgive you on those terms. But that's for my freedom. And the truth be told, and I tell people all the time, you don't have to forgive anybody, just yourself. That is
Hmm.
your right.
Yeah,
And I I really believe that. And I think
yeah.
that we do focus a lot on that, in therapy and things about that. You're never going to be able to move forward if you don't forgive. That's bullshit. And that those are those are handcuffs.
I know,
So
right? I know. I
yeah.
know.
So I don't need to forgive you to move on, because the for years the blame was on me. I never was blaming that person. So I don't know what there is to forgive, but the fact of the matter is, I need to forgive this right here, because
Right.
I'm way more worthy than that individual that did that to me. And there's where the forgiveness comes from.
Yeah. I'm on the fence about that forgiveness thing too.
Ugh, I
Um,
don't like it, to be honest. I really don't. I don't like it when it's positioned in a way that this is going to be a barrier.
you
So
have to do it to move on. Yeah.
yeah, no.
But I feel like we should be awarded reparations. And I think I think that adult survivors of child abuse should be allowed to sue their parents or their abusers for child support and other damages, no matter how old we get. What do you think
Oh,
the punishment should be? What do you think the punishment should be for perpetrators of? I think we alluded to that.
Well, we did a little bit, because
Yeah.
you were talking about castration, and
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, I'm not, I'm not going to be against it, but I do know of, even individuals that, like, I don't want to say that they're castrated, but they can still harm children, and um, you know, it's, I don't. Well, let me just say this: we do not have tight enough sentences on these crimes.
That's
They
a
are
shame.
often very
That is such
dismissed.
a shame.
Um, you know, I put them on an island. There's a lot that I could say that would be out of my, like, narrative of life, because it's not my decision for somebody to live or to die.
Right.
But uh it is a very tough line that I just, you know, uh, I do not believe that they can be reformed. And I, for a long time, I thought maybe I just had kind of like a bias or a very narrow mind on this subject matter, but I have, and I know there's differences of opinion, but I've spoken to numerous doctors that really truly believe that the same belief,
They
that
can be
it's not
reformed.
something that they can, you know, that they can reform. And maybe there's some, I just, I don't know. I have, I've seen it way too many times. I mean, my goodness, there's things I've seen people where they've served 25 years in jail and they're out 6 months and they're doing it again. And, like, come on, come on. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Should it have been 25 years in one day and we would have gotten it then at that point? No, like,
Oh my
no,
God.
you don't
Oh,
deserve to be out here in society. You deserve to be locked in a jail. And
I'm going to have that conversation with another person another time because it sounds like there's a lot in there, in that little part there to talk about.
there is.
Um, you guys comment and let me know what you think the punishment should be for abusers of children, sexual abusers especially. Um, so where's the man now? Where is he?
Well, so I'll tell you the story real quick. So when I started therapy, I was like, hey, listen, I have no desire to face my abuser. I came right out and said I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
A year into therapy, I was like, you know what? I think I might want to do that. Like, so I had made a decision that I was going to, the Tuesday after Memorial Day in 2006 was going to be the day. And I was going to go down to my hometown. My mom and dad still lived down there. They live, like, you come out their door and his house is like catty corner, and I hadn't told my parents yet. So I knew that I was going to have to tell them. Anyway, long story short, I found out that he was still alive. This is how I found him, pretending to be a telemarketer selling a magazine subscription for boating, because I knew he had a boat. And so I sat on that for a while, probably like a good 3 or 4 weeks. And then that's when I came up with my plan about the Tuesday after Memorial Day. So I was like, well, you know what? I think I want to go to my mom and dad first and tell them, and then go to the police station and file whatever paperwork I needed to, because I didn't know how this was all going to play out. So I was like, well, let me figure out where he is. Is he in his home in Central Jersey, or is he in his home in, by my parents? So I called, again, being the telemarketer, and I got his son on the phone. And that was when I had found out that he had died 3 weeks before. And I was devastated. And I instantly had to find his obituary, which I did. And the thing that got me the most was that he was hailed as a war hero, having served in the war. And I thought to myself, my goodness, you are nothing of a hero. And I threw it out, the idea of even telling my parents. And lo and behold, it was probably about a month later in June of that same year that I did tell them.
Yes.
And I was so thankful that I did, because I didn't know, but when the Oprah Show thing came, at least I didn't have to tell them this happened to me and that I was doing this, that it was, here I am. And my parents held themselves very guilty for like a really
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they, I really believe that they turned a corner when I was doing an interview on Radio Times on WHYY, and the question was asked of me, how did I survive? What was going on? How did I get through that and not
Yeah.
fall? And I explained that my mom and dad, like, I grew up in a home where, like, I didn't have domestic violence. I didn't have like drugs and alcohol, and I didn't have neglect. I mean, I had a very good home.
Mhm.
And my parents gave me a place for my feet to land in the worst time of my life that was going on. That is what got me through that.
Wow.
And we now know that when people are living in abuse and they are in an abusive home or they have neglect on top of it, that their survival rate from that trauma as a child is diminished because
Yes.
they're just in a constant state of turmoil. So,
Yeah.
and I think my mom and dad really, I feel like they got it at that time, but it was very hard for me to hear that my mom was a stay-at-home mom and my dad was just like, I worked 3 jobs sometimes in my life so that your mother could be home to prevent something like this from
Like this
happening.
will happen. Yeah.
And it
I
still
can
happens.
imagine the guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
And
you, was there ever a time that you questioned your sexuality?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm asked that question often. Especially I do a presentation every year to first year med students at the University of Penn.
Look at
And that
you.
question comes up. And I explain to them that if you have gone through something like that and you don't question your sexuality, something is wrong. You're not being honest with yourself, and you're probably going to prevent yourself from healing,
Yeah.
because there would be a natural piece to this that you would feel that and you would question that, because of male on male.
Mhm.
And it's a little bit different now because we do speak a little bit more freely about you know people that are gay, and relationships
Yeah.
that are, love is love is love. But
Yeah.
back at that time period, I that was not something that was accepted. And I just by seventh grade, or no, gosh, I can't even remember. But I just remember hearing people say things that were of a derogatory way
Yeah.
about that type of behavior.
Yeah.
And now here I am, I'm harboring this secret.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like there's just so much processing that's going on in your brain that's not healthy processing. It's processing for survival because
Right.
you don't know the words. And so it really is very, very struggling. And the questioning comes after the fact of, well, is that why? Is that, like what?
Right.
Because you're really looking for a reason. And but
Mhm.
it certainly, yes, it is something that is part of that healing process. And it's the way it is.
Okay. So as I was preparing for this, right, I was, uh, I started getting a little concerned that we're opening up a door that might have been shut for a while, and that some of this, you know how some people think that, oh, this should have been forgotten now by
Mhm.
now. So I'm concerned about where you go after this, like after this show right now. Are you gonna be okay? I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are, but
No,
like,
but it's a great question, because even just I'm asked this, not just in the speaking in this moment, but when I'm speaking of, oh, well, I did this, sexual victims panel, and working with the police on how they cannot re-victimize, or I'm speaking to a group of victims or whatever. I'm always asked, how do I keep myself grounded from
Yeah.
not falling back into it, because you're on the front line, you're
Yeah.
speaking of this.
Yeah.
Do I feel it after the fact? 100%, because sometimes I'm not even just feeling it for me, but I'm also feeling it for somebody else, for the empathy that that person needs. And that, but the truth of the matter is that I take care of myself. I try to go to the gym every morning, Monday through Friday. I meditate every morning. I continue to journal.
Yes.
I watch what I eat. I don't
Yeah.
drink alcohol. I
Yeah.
haven't smoked ironically, since I did the Oprah Show. And I live a very good life with very good people around me.
That's awesome.
It is the most important piece that the circle doesn't have to be big, but it has to have some quality to it. And believe me, I have that. And I and advocacy has been my best medicine for me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I know that that's what there to me. I don't know. It is like a jolt of electricity for me. And you know, my family is great. My wife is a wonderful person. We'll be married 33 years coming up in December.
Yay!
My children are grown. My I have my daughter Paige. I have my son Steven. I have my best friend who's like my other son to me. His name is Josh, which in total is 4 grandchildren. Life
Wow.
is good. Like,
That's
life is
wonderful.
challenging. It's not like it's always going to be a challenge. But gosh, there's so many good things, and that's really what keeps me centered to what I do. And yeah, believe me, there are days where I just, it is just, it's usually the days that bother me the most are like the stories that you hear, or when you're watching somebody's just struggling to get through this, and you know that they can get to a better place with it, but they've just got to go through it, and it is very upsetting.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you know, I keep it very, do I have my moments where it's never gone.
Thank you for saying that. Thank
Yeah, I
you for
mean,
saying that, Brett.
it's never
Thank
gone.
you. It's
Yeah, and that's the
lifelong.
truth. That's the truth. And
Yeah.
but I know what to do with it now. I know
Yes.
where it belongs, and I know the energy that I won't give to that.
Right. Right.
And I I really honestly I will tell you that I after that weekend in Georgia, and really I made the decision that I was going to take the life that was being given to me, and just kind of live one day at a time as
Yes.
I became who I was supposed to be, and just
Yeah.
and it led me down that path now. And I say to people all the time, believe me, you don't have to go on Oprah to feel better. You don't have to become an advocate. That's not what this is about. This is about just you feeling, speaking the words makes a difference. And I
Yes.
always, like, you start off the saying that, we're not a medical advice. I'm not the therapist, and I'm not the law. And I always direct people to counseling. I believe in it. Um, and and there's nothing wrong with it. Every year on July 5th, I celebrate that day of walking into that psychologist's office and post very proudly about it, because I want people to know this is you wouldn't be shamed if you were like, oh, I'm going to the heart doctor. Like, there's no shame in
Right.
this. Like, why are you
Right.
being shameful about wanting to be better? But we have this idea that going to a psychologist is admitting that you can't handle your life. No, it's admitting that I want a better life.
Want a better
That's
life.
what I'm
Yeah.
celebrating.
That's awesome. And so I'm fascinated with the human ability to weather severe trauma and still manage to show up and accomplish amazing things after going through such horrifying events. And the definition of survivor is to live on and prosper. So now you spend a lot of your time advocating and supporting survivors. Tell me about your show and everything else that you
Yeah.
do to support survivors. Tell me about it.
So, yeah, here's how that all came to be. We were planning we do a domestic violence outreach event every year. And I had somebody that was a volunteer for me. She was an intern at RVN Studios. And she coordinated for me to come in there and film a commercial to promote the event.
Wow.
And the producer, owner of the network, said, have you ever thought about doing a show? And lo and behold,
Oh
I
my God,
did.
that's
And
so cool.
it was one of those, okay, this was October. So he's like, well, come back after the holidays and let's do it. And so I did. And it is the show focuses on child abuse, domestic violence, and bullying. We speak with individuals that have gone through something and come out the other side, as
Yeah.
well as speaking to agencies, law enforcement, counselors, whatever type of individuals that are there to support people getting through that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I tell people all the time that the pinch me moments are, you could not have told me. I think of the 12-year-old boy laying on this bed in this house with this predator that's stealing the most precious pieces of me, that someday he would be hosting this weekly talk show and speaking in front of the medical community or the legal community of this story that I thought was going to be a secret I would take to my grave.
Wow.
Um, and that's where the immense level of gratitude comes from,
I
that
understand.
every day I get to do this work,
Wow.
and I get to do it in a way that allows me to love special people in my life, where that little boy was sitting at that time would have never seen that. And
Mm.
that's joy and a miracle right there.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. So you're doing amazing work, and your community needs you to continue doing this work, advocating for and fighting for men and women who have been abused. Thank you for fighting for us women too, because as we said before, the pain is the same. And thank you for staying loyal to the cause. And I cannot thank you enough for gracing the Big Up Yourself show with your presence and your courage. I thank you. Thank you so much. How can I help? How can the Big Up Yourself show support you, your work?
Yeah, I can give you the link if somebody wants to donate to the Humanity Preservation
Okay.
Foundation,
Okay.
and I'll give you kind of just like a quick little synopsis of what we do. We
Yeah.
really we come at it in two angles. We advocate to prevent it from happening, to educate. We also act as an advisory to services to help people necessarily find services that are out there, a doctor, legal, whatever, books. We launched Recover Your Way because we know that addiction is often just a symptom of something greater, and it's often childhood trauma. And
Right.
if we don't settle that, we know that that's where people go back to where they were. We also have a junior ambassador program. It's high school students that come on as volunteers. They learn about the topics, and then become an ambassador within their school, speaking in their language, in their way. We know
Yeah.
that kids would rather hear it from their peers than from us. So, and that's how you change the world, is through that. So, yeah. So anybody it can donate. We operate coast to coast. We technology is out there, and that's what allows us to be a virtual operation. Um, I've done some incredible things, as far reaching to Australia. I had a young man that came and stayed with us for a while that um, you know had been abused, lost his court case against his perpetrator, and but his mom, she, while his case was coming up, she saw the Oprah Show, and then she found me on Facebook. We became friends, and she called me up. She's like, I need to get him out of here. Would you consider?" I was like, "Absolutely." So, he's married now with 3 children, and So anyway, yeah. So that is great. We are about to have our biggest fundraiser of the year, called the Orange Tie Affair. It's a spin on the whole black tie affair, but it's orange. Orange hearts is our motto and our logo. So that's happening in 21 days. In fact, that's the picture from 2021. So, but yeah, so it's a big event. And yeah, so I mean, if anybody wants to donate to that, that's great too. But I think the thing too is that I appreciate the fact, how can you help? But I want to make sure that people know out there that we're there to help them as well too. And the topics and the things that we're talking about, which interpersonal violence, that when you had said that, is what that means is violence from somebody that we know. That's what that means, is that it was something happened and it was somebody that you knew. So when you think about child sex abuse, is very often it's not a stranger. Obviously, domestic violence happens from that's where intimate partner violence comes from, and bullying, you often know who your bully is. So, but that's really what we focus on. And but so I want to just say that these topics are hard. They're very hard to hear, and that if you can relate to some of them, then you know lean on your support mechanisms that you have. And if you don't, reach out. I mean, we will help you find some services. And our recovery platform, we have 2 meetings a week on Sundays and Thursdays for just general conversation. People come on, talk about recovery, talk about whether it's abuse. Sometimes we're just talking about how you know kids are driving us crazy at home or whatever. So but yeah, I there's not enough resources that are out there. And so every little bit, this show that you do, this is like, it shatters. Like, I can't say it enough. And you know, some days I'm like, oh God, I'm exhausted. Did I do anything? Like, did I make a difference? And man, you know what? I know I did. Oh, somehow I can't hear you. Yeah, my volume is up. Can you hear me? I'll have to edit this part out. You want to put me back in the waiting room?
Let me, oh, here I go. But can you
Oh,
hear me now?
I hear you now. Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. We're
Um,
coming to the
yeah,
end of the show. I guess it's trying to tell
yeah,
us it's time to go. But I have one more
I
thing.
agree.
What um what would you like to big up yourself for in this moment?
Wait, say that again.
What would you like to big up yourself for in this moment? That's the final question.
Gosh, how do people normally answer that?
No, just pick one. Pick something because you're amazing all around. You are amazing.
You know, I honestly, for me, it is, if nothing else, gratitude is probably my number one thing. And it goes along with, I can't, and really, I mean this, the number of great people that I have come into contact with through this entire process, not just people that I've helped, but just really great people. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting with one for the last 2 hours. Like, think about our legacy and our relationship and how it, like, that is
It's
just,
beautiful. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
like, it's a
It really
wonderful
is.
thing that was what, 2011,
I
2012? I mean,
know. It's been a while.
like,
It's been a while.
yeah, and yet we're still here and we're still doing it and we're still doing it. Like, that to me, that defines why I'm so grateful. And you're one person in a great circle like that. I even if I didn't do another thing tomorrow, let's say I
Yeah.
just said I'm done being an advocate, I have a collection of individuals that are these relationships that just will never disappear, because whether they're this or whether they're here, I can't even begin to tell you. So I'm gonna say that is my big up. So I just, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
No,
so
thank
much.
you.
I can't tell you how much this means to me that you were able to come and join me this evening. And guys, I have resources in the description box, so check it out if you need some help or if you want to get in touch with Rhett. There is his information in the description box. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope we helped you in some